I want to share a story many of you probably know about a really important Jewish topic, brisket. So the story goes, or at least one version of it, is that there's a young woman and she's preparing a brisket for the first time on her own. She's with a friend, and in the preparation, she cuts off both ends, she puts the spices and whatever else she's putting into it and puts it in the pan and into the oven. And her friend asks, "Why do you cut off the ends? It's the best part." She replies, "I actually don't know. That's just how my mom did it. So, maybe I'll ask her." So the girl, the young woman, went to her mother and said, "Why do we cut the ends off the brisket before we put it in the oven?" And the mother said, "Well, because that's what you do. You cut off the ends, you prepare it, and you put it in the pan, and you put it in the oven." "But why do you cut off the ends?" And the mother answered, "That's how my mother did it, and she taught me how to cook brisket." Lucky for them, the young woman's grandmother was alive, so they went to her and said, "Grandma, how do you cook a brisket?" "Well, you cut off both ends, you prepare it, you put it in the pan, and you put it in the oven." She said, "But why do you cut off the ends?" And the grandmother, her eyes sparkled knowingly, and she said, "Well, the brisket was always bigger than the pan we had, so I had to cut off the ends so it would fit in the pan to fit in the oven." So it became this family tradition. That's how we always did it. Without the grandmother in the story, there would have been no explanation that ever made sense to her daughter and her granddaughter. They could have done their best guessing, but luckily they had their grandmother to explain the ritual of cooking brisket. And it would have been something passed down generation to generation without anyone knowing why, had it not been for the grandmother. And I share this story not to prove that we should all listen to our grandparents' stories carefully, although you should, but because we find something inexplicable in our Torah portion this week. Something that we still don't understand to this very day, nor have Jews really understood it arguably for centuries, and that's the episode of the Parah Adumah, the red heifer. So the chapter opens with God telling Moses and Aaron what to do when someone is rendered ritually impure. The text says, "This is the ritual law that Adonai has commanded. Instruct the Israelite people to bring you a red cow without blemish, in which there is no defect, on which no yoke has been laid. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest. It shall be taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. And then Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle it 7 times toward the front of the tent of meeting." Aren't you glad Judaism's different now? "The cow shall be burned in his sight, and the priest shall take cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson stuff and throw them into the fire, consuming the cow. The ashes of the cow are then mixed with water and used in this purification ritual." I personally find comfort in knowing that this ritual even sounded crazy to ancient Israelites, not just to us in this current day. It is said in a rabbinic tale that even the great and wise King Solomon said, "I have labored to understand the word of God and have understood it all, except for the ritual of the red heifer." The red heifer is the Torah's equivalent to the brisket story, just much, much more gory, and without the grandmother there to explain and tell us why it's something that we were supposed to do when there was the temple. So how did our sages attempt to make sense of this ritual? They didn't just leave it. They didn't just say, well, some of them did say, because God said so, but they also tried to find ways to understand it differently. So our sages differentiated between 2 different kinds of mitzvot, 2 different kinds of commandments. So this Torah portion is called hukat, which comes from the word chok, or statute, which is compared, the rabbis compare it to a mishpat, a law. So medieval philosopher Maimonides distinguished between a chok and a mishpat by saying that a mishpat is something that makes sense to us. We just get it intuitively, like, don't kill, be kind to the stranger, love your neighbor, I don't know if anyone else has any other ones that they feel like make a lot of sense, but we can just figure it out. It's like don't steal. Like being good in the world makes the world better. But a chok is something that we don't necessarily understand. A chok is something that we are just told that we need to do. It doesn't necessarily make logical sense. And no amount of mental gymnastics would enable us to really understand why. A contemporary rabbi, Audrey Korotkin, says it another way to explain the difference between these. And she says, perhaps chukim involve commandments between humanity and God, and mishpatim are those among people. So again, the chukim are the because I said so laws. So when we think about this idea of chok, an illogical commandment, we realize that this question that has been asked for centuries is something worth struggling about. Even if we know that we will never find the answer at the end of that search, it still brings us something to try to struggle with it. So in the case of the red heifer, one rabbi, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, offers a symbolic interpretation to try to understand this. He might know that this might not be the literal reason why the red heifer ritual was what it was, but he wants to offer an interpretation that we can maybe understand or also may move us today. He says that the red cow represents the animal nature of human beings, all of the unmastered, uncontrolled powers each person possesses. Such powers, he argues, are expressed in behavior that is self-destructive and often abusive to others. He continues, in slaughtering a red cow that has never worn a yoke, symbolizing our unrestrained powers, we take control back from our evil inclinations, from the animal nature within us. Rabbi Harvey Fiel says that human beings can correct their wrongdoing. That's what Rabbi Hirsch, he's saying, is trying to explain, that there is a way out of the harm and hurt that humans do. And I would add one more thing, which is that the antidote to correcting our wrongdoings is love. We must take that idea of perfection, symbolized by the red heifer who had to be perfect, had to have never worked a day in its life, and sacrifice it, completely destroy it. The ritual of the red heifer provided an opportunity for those who may have been drowning in guilt to rejoin their community. Again, thankfully, we don't participate in such rituals. I imagine many rabbis probably would not have become rabbis if that was still part of it. I don't know about you. I would not have. But even though we don't participate in these rituals, we still need to find ways to release ourselves from guilt, even if we may not understand even some of the things we do. But so much is out of our control in life. And we know that we will fall, we will falter. But you know what we can control? How much we love and how we love. As we approach the high holy days in only 3 months, are rabbis the only one who are like acutely aware of this? Is that not everybody? As we approach the high holy days, it's time we say, I am enough. And we'll take that feeling and start to heal ourselves and others by putting more love into the world, by trying to struggle with things that don't always make sense to us, whether it's something we've done, something someone else has done, or something that's just how the world is. And let it be that when someone asks future generations why they were so kind, so patient, and so loving, that the answer will be, that's just how my parents did it. And that would be enough. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.